Nothing in this program should be considered investment advice. It is for educational purposes only. Please hit pause and read this disclaimer in full. Very rarely can you say there's a new sheriff in town.
Truly a new sheriff. He doesn't seem to be, the problem in the past is that Democrats would talk out of this side of their mouth and Republicans talk out of this side of their mouth, and they do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
In this case, he's heading in a completely different direction if he continues to follow through with it.
Yeah. Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to this very, very, very special Finance U, because Paul and I are actually, well, we're in fellowship here. I'm at Paul's office down here in Jasper, Georgia. We had some great time fishing. We'll tell you more about that in a second, but Trump's inauguration was yesterday. We made it through without anything really bad happening from a surprise standpoint, but there's a lot to digest. This is the day after the inauguration when we're recording this. It's January 21st, and there is going to be a lot that we're going to have to figure out over time. So I'm not saying we have it all settled.
Right.
There's a lot that happened, wasn't there?
There's a lot just in the past 5 minutes when I was cruising news before we started that I didn't get a chance to dig into.
Yeah. Oh, so, I analyzed the assassination attempt in Butler, and that stood out for me, Paul, was when he stood up and he said in his inauguration address that God turned his head and he came up a changed man. And so this idea that he's here to rescue America and that this is part of that he was saved for this job. It puts a little extra, it's not about, that puts a whole different dimension on it for me.
It does me too, and I pray, events like that can change the direction of an individual's life. And I pray that if there's a fear of God and he understands this is about the American people, it's not about his pride, then he can dig in and do what needs to be done to change the direction of our ship.
Yeah. Now, we're going to try and analyze this from markets portfolio. It's really early to figure this out, but I already think there's seismic changes. And so here's how I see things so far. There's a certain strategy you can pursue called shock and awe, which we did during Gulf Storm, the original under Bush, who looked really uncomfortable at the inauguration, if you saw him.
That video was great.
He looked uncomfortable, but I think somebody else wanted a pardon that didn't get one.
Yeah.
So at any rate, we had that shock and awe. And shock and awe just means that you move so fast that your enemy is processing event 1 and you're already on 5, right? So I think we saw some shock and awe yesterday. Executive orders, only 2 genders, Gulf of America, not Mexico. What am I missing? There were so many things. Panama Canal, January 6 people being pardoned out. And then I think most importantly, he threw the administration under the bus.
Yes.
Fractured America, broke it, harmed it, the border, all of that. So this is very rarely can you say there's a new sheriff in town.
Truly a new sheriff. He doesn't seem to be, the problem in the past is that Democrats would talk out of this side of their mouth and Republicans talk out of this side of their mouth, and they do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
In this case, he's heading in a completely different direction if he continues to follow through with it.
Yeah. So in the less than 24 hours, I guess it's about 24 hours now, rescission of 78 Biden-era executive orders. I have looked at 3 of them, so I got 75 more to go.
78.
Yeah. Freezing federal regulations.
That's a big deal in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. That'll take the burden off the small business and free up the American ingenuity.
Oh, do you think so? I redodged the bullet of the beneficial ownership, the FinCEN rule.
Yes.
That was terrible, and I sort of drug my feet, and then I started doing it in a flurry because they had that last minute restay of the injunction, whatever that was, and then they undid it again. You think that's off the table? I think that's how I read that.
I would be highly surprised. Yes, it has to be.
Okay. We have a freeze on federal hiring. Well, that's good news.
That is good news.
I think. Yeah. We have federal workers must return to full-time in-person work immediately. Okay. That, I don't want to be too dismissive, but that one's called the let the trash take itself out order. because there's going to be a whole bunch of people who were working from home in their cushy jobs who weren't really doing any work. And now, Paul, they're going to have to come back to work and be productive. And I think some percentage, 10, 15, are going to go, I'm out.
I bet maybe 10 to 15 in the North Georgia area that have moved in here after COVID and working from home. So I'm curious to see if there'll be a few houses for sale.
Oh, interesting. But that's gonna that one actually probably ties in with Doge. That one right there is probably your free hall pass for getting just attrition, just getting rid of workers. Like they take themselves out of the game, right? Yeah. A directive to address the cost of living crisis. Now we've been talking about inflation a lot, but what can you imagine just off the top of your head? What kind of directives could you make to address the cost of living crisis?
That one perplexes me. Now, I did hear a report, well, I haven't had a chance to dig into it, that if somebody's paying child support, you get the parent paying child support gets to claim that child on their taxes, which has been something in the past where the parent that had the child, I don't know if that's true, haven't had a chance to dig into it. Is it little things like that? Or is this, I don't know how they could do that without causing.
Well, there's only two things that actually cause cost of living crisis. Yeah. Federal surplus deficit spending. Yeah. And money printing.
Yes.
Everything else is sort of a wash, as it turns out.
So in that directive, if they allow some deflation to happen, which would be a surprise to most market participants because everybody thinks back 2016, Trump was so obsessed with the stock market. If he allows some deflation to happen by pulling this excess fiscal spending out and getting our budget under control, that would deal with the cost of living crisis for sure for a lot of individuals.
Well, that's interesting. So, I mean, when I think about it, just judging from the TikTok videos that I've seen, but also the just raw budgetary understanding, it's rent and mortgage, it's groceries, and then it's your insurance costs.
Yes. Healthcare,
and auto,
property and casualty, auto,
which have all gone through the roof if they're even available. Some locations for that last part. So what kind of a directive could address rental costs or mortgage costs?
That's a good question. I can't think of anything unless he comes up with some type of tax deduction for a basic cost of living.
Okay.
That may help some.
But then you get but that just means that the government is taking in lower revenue, which means it has to spend more on the back end. So it feels good, but it doesn't actually address the cost of living. It just shifts it.
Yeah, and that's not going to accomplish what Doge is looking to accomplish.
Right. All right, I'm going to have to dig into that one. I don't know what it means yet. That's interesting. How about withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty? That's going to stick in a few throats.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was, that whole Inflation Act that Biden put in, which was inappropriately named because it was another way to spend $500 billion on things. And a lot of it was alternative energy, we'll call it.
So maybe withdrawing from the climate treaty reduces the cost of input across the board and pulls down the cost of living some. Maybe.
Well, actually, remember there was this whole thing, you'd know more about it than me, but the SEC had this whole, companies have to report their climate, carbon. It was a whole new reporting requirement came out last year. I don't know. Very expensive. I saw companies complaining bitterly about it. Like, how am I going to assess my carbon? So all this new reporting. And so maybe that comes off the table now.
I mean, if you get the regulatory cost off of the corporate books, they can sell their products for less, still maintain a profit margin. That's good for the average individual.
Yeah.
And still maintains profits in the corporation.
You know what? Gold and silver are my top choices to protect my wealth against inflation and economic instability. Now, with all the monetary debasement and all these geopolitical risks going on, hedging your wealth has never been more important. I recommend that everybody owns some gold and silver physical in your hot little hands. But what if you want to hold it elsewhere? Goldcore is an excellent choice and will rapidly and securely deliver physical gold and silver to your doorstep. But Goldcore also lets you buy and store your gold and silver in high security vaults in places like Switzerland or Singapore or the US at your choice. And for all of my followers, Goldcore will provide your first 6 months of storage for free. With Goldcore, You get the convenience of buying and selling precious metals as easily as stocks, but with the security of your metals being fully allocated and segregated, meaning they sit in a secure location, on a shelf, in a box, with your name and your name only on it. Now, unlike your stocks, where you are actually a subordinated security entitlement claimant, something we learned during our Great Taking series, you are the one and only named owner of your metals. But just like stocks, you can still sell your metals instantly at market prices without any unnecessary delays. Need liquidity? Goldcore gives you immediate access to cash. But if you prefer physical delivery, getting them shipped to you is a mouse click away. Goldcore offers a range of investment options from gold and silver coins and bars to self-directed IRAs, again, all with fully segregated and secure storage. Take control of your financial future today with Goldcore, where investing in precious metals has never been easier, more secure, or more transparent. Remember, Peak Prosperity followers get 6 months of free storage. So sign up now at peak.fan/goldcore to secure your 6 months of free storage. Again, that's peak.fan/goldcore.
Hey, I love this one. Directive to restore free speech and eliminate government censorship. I love that one. I don't know what that means yet, but I like it as an idea. And directive to end government weaponization against political opponents, which would be such a departure from the past. Mm-hmm. And honestly, you know what? That stretches back to Hoover.
Hoover. That part.
Yeah. Because you had the original version of the FBI, and then that came under, what was that guy's name? The big FBI director who was famous for this. Anyway, they've been suppressing political opponents for a long time in this country. Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah. It's a thing. Anyway, it's part of it. But so that's within the first 24 hours. Actually, all those came out last night. That's incredible. And,
well, that tells you he's prepared. He's not wasting any time.
yeah.
And the sense of urgency I like, because the quicker he can get this in and take the burden off the average individual, and thinking about that, ending the weaponization,
Yeah.
that may go a long way to help bring our country back together again. Instead of polarizing right and left, to bring everybody back together.
Well, there's going to be some people who are going to scream when the DOJ goes after people from the prior administration for legitimate crimes that they committed. They're going to say, oh, that's unfair. Whereas I know that here in Georgia, I know of somebody, a lawyer, who was charged with election interference because he showed a video to one of his state reps of somebody shoving ballots into a machine multiple times. And it was a public video.
So, and you're charged just for showing a public video of somebody
To a public official. Yep.
And the public official's supposed to have the responsibility to protect the election integrity.
That was weaponization right there.
That was weaponization. It sure was.
Yeah. Well, and then I think the big news, and this is going to actually have, I think, significant impacts on things, how much money is spent, how the country operates, all of that. This could get a little chaotic for a while, but ending Biden's mass parole programs, right? Mm-hmm. So that's through that CBP-1 app, all that stuff, reinstating the Remain in Mexico policy, ending catch and release of illegal migrants, and ending birthright citizenship, meaning the people who come here just to have a baby to get the auto citizenship for their offspring. Those are big changes right there.
That is. So the birthright citizenship is not going to affect an existing citizen in the United States.
Right.
It'll just be someone who's not a citizen that has a child on our soil.
It looks, the way I read it, on a go-forward basis. So closes the border.
We're following the rule of law like we're supposed to now, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's going to be a little expensive. Said, I had an idea. They're like, it's going to cost $80 billion to send everybody home. I'm like, well, what if you just send the message out loud and clear that, hey, if we have to round you up, you're getting like rough treatment on the way home, and you can't come back in this country, like Holman has said, for 20 years, no visas, no nothing.
That's a good point.
Say, or $500 plane flight and a $500 voucher if you leave on your own from these airports on these days, and you just they take themselves home.
Self-report. go home, be out of here.
So 1 million people, if that's $1,000 program per person, that's $1 billion to get rid of a million people, which isn't that bad. Not 80 billion.
Not bad. But if you think, how much have we been spending through the food stamps, the welfare program, the housing of all these? This administration's just spent ridiculous amounts of money.
Yeah.
Not taking care of the American citizens who are struggling. I mean, I hear that all over the place. American citizens that can't get the same assistance from the government that the illegal immigrants that have been coming across our borders are. $1,000, $2,000 a person, I would assume is minimal compared to the cost that we're adding to our national debt based on how this prior administration has been spending to get them out of the country. And the thing I like is he made it clear he's going after the criminals, the convicted, what would be felons for us, convicted felons, murderers, rapists that came in from other countries.
Well, that was astonishing. Was in just recently before the inauguration, there was a bill that came out. I think it was Representative Macy who put it up, which was said, if you're here illegally and you rape somebody, you're going home. It's an instant deportation. There were 148 Congress people who voted against that.
I don't understand that at all.
How do you vote against that?
I don't know. I don't understand that at all. Unless you desire evil upon the American people, unless you desire division and suppression of the American people. I mean, in no way can you vote. I don't understand how you could vote for that, against that, excuse me.
Yeah, I don't understand either. Well, anyway, so a lot of stuff going on. And I have another, he also had a national emergency declared around energy, which we can get to in a bit. I don't know what that means yet. It's very complicated. This isn't so Trump the first. He would have just sort of said that and then hoped things worked out. This national energy emergency declared, Paul, is very nuanced. It's about how it interacts with the Endangered Species Act and department heads who are going to have to interpret the Clean Air Act and clean water, federal leasing, laws, courts. It was nuanced. So this time they came in with that thing. Somebody worked on that for a long time and thought it through very carefully. Now I can't analyze what that means because I'm not a policy wonk, right? But it was nuanced.
Yes.
And prepared. Wasn't like he just came up with that last night on the fly.
Well, what he's been hunkered down since the election at Mar-a-Lago, having people come in and meet and plan and prepare. So.
Big preparation. So that's how I'm detecting this. And this feels like a shock and awe thing. And I don't even know what came out this morning while we were doing other things together. And I'm sure even more. All right. So.
Oh, the one thing I did hear came out just a few minutes, read the headline before we came in. He did something with offshore wind leases. Gone, terminated them. And apparently one of the solar companies that I have no exposure to and don't actually know the name just cratered right on the other side of the news.
I'm okay with that, and I'll tell you why. Every place they've been trying to put these offshore wind farms in, they've just been killing whales. Like, these things are not good for the environment, right? If we're putting them in to save the environment, but we're killing all the whales, we're doing it wrong.
Yes.
Right? And they just never stop to sort of analyze that. Anyway, there's that. But second, here's my thing, Paul. If offshore wind farms were actually good, private companies would be making a lot of money at it. And they're all sucking wind with subsidies. It tells me it's not a viable thing.
Correct.
Like, so why would we continue to kill whales and subsidize something that's actually not viable? Because if it was viable, people would be doing it, right? It's just a rule I have.
Yeah. Well, and it would be, and I would be seeing that presented to clients. I've never had somebody come and present, hey, invest into this solar wind field, because mathematics just don't make sense.
If the mathematics did, I would already have been pitched dozens of syndications.
Yes.
People would say, hey, here's a return. They would probably be all tranched out. You could get in on the mezzanine wind tower farm level, and I'd know all about it.
Yes.
I've never been pitched one. So it's either so good that they're keeping it all for themselves, or it doesn't work.
Or it doesn't work, and it's just a money funneling. Let's keep money going here in the technology industry.
I'm going with B until otherwise.
Now, I will say the solar farms, I've seen a couple of those, and the math does work on.
Yeah, oh, yes. Yep.
But not the wind farms, especially offshore wind farms.
Yeah, exactly. All right, moving on. This is the South. We're in the South, technically.
Yes.
Yeah, here we are. Does this comport with what you know? So we're looking at a chart here for anybody just listening. New homes for sale from 1973 to 2004, and today there are more homes for sale than at the peak of the so-called housing bubble bursting there in 2000. What's that? 6, I guess, was the peak here.
It was actually, it turned in 2006 slowly, and it didn't really gain steam until 2008.
Yeah, see, it tips down and it bumps back up again. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So Holly and I actually, because our tools were throwing off red flags back then, we were in a house that we had built to sell. We sold our home, put it on the market in November of 2007. Real estate agents were all giddies, like, oh, you're going to get X amount of dollars for this house, which was ridiculous for what we built it for at the time. And I told Holly, I said, don't get your hopes up. We didn't get one offer until February, and they were within 15% of our asking price, and I snatched it out of their hands. And then by that summer, prices were down a good 25% more.
Yeah. What does this make today? Does this feel like right? I know your son
Yeah.
is in the biz. Buildings. Does this make sense? What you're hearing?
It does. So I was telling Chris earlier for the audience out there, my son's really detailed in trying to figure out where he wants to be. So he's been looking at builders and competitors in the certain areas, and the North Georgia market is just absolutely saturated right now. Prices haven't softened dramatically, but we're starting to see asking prices drop for the first time since 2019.
Yeah.
Well, really before, because you just had this slow momentum that was coming up. So he's found a couple of pockets of areas that are growing more from the industrial base, because he's commercial construction is what he does. So that's where he's looking to move to. But yes, my wife's seeing it in prices that she's seeing soften. Homes are on the market a lot longer.
Yeah.
Land is frozen. I mean, small lots are selling for the right person, but larger tracts that were just flying off the shelves and, right after COVID with all the money printed, they're frozen right now. And everybody's still hoping the prices are going to come back, and everybody's hoping that Trump's going to goose the, market again, and real estate's going to be great. But that is in line with what I'm hearing.
Well, that's the cadence of real estate, right? So the first thing that happens is supply builds. That's what we're seeing in this chart. Supply is building, and then prices follow later. And then when you see that big fall off in supply of homes there through 2008, 9 into early 2010, that big giant down, that isn't because those homes were selling like crazy. That's because people are pulling them off the market.
Yeah.
Right. So supply is how many are on the market, and there's reasons they come off the market.
That's right.
They're bought or you pull them.
Mm-hmm.
So people were pulling them because they were just depressed and like, I got to get more for my house. And
yeah, by the time 2010 came around, nobody wanted to sell their home. They wanted to hold on to it because the banks were forcing the foreclosures. And then you had, the auctions and sales that were taking place through 2012, 13.
Yeah.
And then we were underbuilt, dramatically underbuilt here. And my concern is we've seen this pendulum swing really hard in the other direction. And so a lot of second homes, a lot of VRBOs. Now, we've had a lot of people move in the North Georgia area, but even Atlanta, all the data is saying it's overbuilt. Throughout Georgia, I'm hearing people are slowing down. Not dramatically so, but the question is if we're overbuilt, then this slowing is going to continue, especially if interest rates stay higher.
well, I'm bringing all this up because I think Trump has been handed, I'll politely call a hot potato. And so we know that the prior administration McFibbed about the McJobs report, right? They lied about how many jobs there were, and they're quietly trying to undo that bureaucratically at the BLS and all that. We know that they fib everybody, every administration ever about inflation. Yes. Understating it all the time for obvious reasons, right? They're incentivized to. Makes them look better, and they have to pay less in COLA so they can spend more on their pet projects. Great. Got it. But within that, this was already building. This is independent of Trump or Biden. There was like a big, huge housing bubble that then the Fed burst because they started rising interest rates. Everybody got used to 0%. A house at 3% 30-year is a very different proposition from 7.
Dramatically so.
Right?
Dramatically so. Yeah.
And people stretched and it made sense, and houses always go up. But when they find out that houses can also go down in price, all right, that's a big leg of the overall economy. It's big.
It really is.
AI doesn't solve it.
No. AI doesn't solve that. I've seen the robots that can put the bricking on the side of a home, but still, like in the North Georgia mountains, it's great if you're on flat land. In the North Georgia mountains, when you're building on the side of a cliff, essentially, it doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
But there's still this pervasive belief that, and it's the hindsight bias. And I think I talked about it before. Roth DeBelly had an article that I read, it's a white paper back in 2011 called "No More News," like mainstream news media. And then it's a book called "The Art of Thinking Clearly." So that hindsight bias, and I like to try to listen to some podcasts and individuals that know real estate. And the argument is should I rent for the next year? And the debate is as well, prices were X back in 2017, 18, and you've missed out on all this growth. But I think this is a completely different environment from where we are right now. I mean, prices exploded when you had all the printing that took place with COVID and the fiscal recklessness of the last administration. But in the North Georgia mountains, our economy is reliant upon housing. I mean, that's pretty much it. Building second homes and retirement homes, and we don't have manufacturing. And if housing slows, then our local economy in North Georgia, and really in Georgia, outside of Atlanta and Savannah is a little protected, really struggles when housing turns.
Well, it's more than North Georgia. I think we're going to see here that this is a nationwide survey, buying conditions for housing. This comes from Bravos Research. I find them on Twitter. I think you'll see their handle in the next one, but very easy to find, Bravos Research on Twitter. But look at that, buying conditions. This goes back to 1980. Those gray bars, of course, are recessions. And you can see there's a little correlation between, people's willingness to buy in recessions. Of course, that makes some sense. We're at a level of buying, like the bullishness for, I feel like buying a home is at 30%. It's never been this low since 1980. Was that 45 years ago now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, houses are priced to perfection based on the income of the average individual. The asset price inflation that we've had since COVID has helped the top 10%. But you got 70% of the population now that, they're paying 7.6, I heard someone say today, times their salary for a home. In the past, on the high side, it had gotten to 6.25. I mean, that
3 or 4 is healthy.
Yeah, 3 and 4 is healthy.
Yeah. 3 and 4 times salary income.
And it's asset price inflation, but that inflation in assets has not relayed over into salaries. Salaries have gone up some, but not from an inflation adjusted standpoint like housing has.
Yeah.
So, your margin for error, and they're strapped. So you go buy one of these homes if you're young or if you're struggling. If you haven't accumulated assets, your margin for error is minimal.
Yep.
And people are scared, right? Can the Fed continue to print? What's going to happen if the inflation controls? So now they're getting hit with high rents. They're getting hit with inflation. They feel like they're left behind and houses are taking off.
Right.
And the banks are tightening up a little bit so they don't qualify for them. I've heard several real estate agents tell me here recently that they've had a few closings fall through because the individuals didn't qualify for the loan, and the real estate agents weren't concerned. They know who's going to qualify and who's not most of the time. So that means the market's turning a little bit.
Tightening conditions. Okay. Well, and then the last part of that story, of course, would be this, which is, so this is bond prices. So as the price goes up, the yield is falling. This goes back starting in 1980 again, 40 years of falling interest rates, and then we just broke that trend line here. This is real data up through here. I don't know if everybody can see my mouse, so I'm describing that this chart has both real data and then what Bravos, I think, has taken a red pen to and drawn what the future might look like, right? And so, because you see it goes out to 2028 out there. But anyway, if that's true, and it was a falling interest rate regime, Paul, and now it's a rising interest rate regime, it's a whole different world that everybody who thinks they know how housing works because of that uptrend, they don't know how it works when it goes the other way. No. I was sitting down, Evie and I we gave a nice talk in our town of Chester, Massachusetts, and there was an older gentleman there, a little bit older than me, and he's like, I don't understand why kids these days don't just. And this guy owned a big old real estate portfolio locally, and I said, sir, with all due respect, you were buying while interest rates were falling.
Yeah.
And now this is completely different environment.
Completely different. So when interest rates are falling from 1982 forward, if you get yourself in a bind, and a little bit of a bind, you just get tight, right? Then you can refinance that down, and along the way, supply and demand, interest rates come down, the lower the payment is for people. Incomes were going up pretty good in the 80s. So their margin for error was minimal. So, hey, if you stumble, you can refinance down, you can put your head on the chopping block to buy a lot of properties.
Yeah.
But if you're a younger investor right now, I mean, you're really playing Russian roulette. Your margin for error is so minimal that you're done in your first property. If the economy tanks, we have some deflation. If you've, let's say,
You're upside down and frozen.
yeah, Bravos is right. Interest rates go down in the short run because of certain factors, but then the printing comes back, or the inflation continues, or the bricks replace the dollar with the unit. That would be inflationary for us, or currency crisis. And then interest rates go up again dramatically. Oh, you put your head on the chopping block. You've got a 5-year adjustable, and you think that it's going to go down, and now all of a sudden you're refinancing at 12%. Into a stagflationary economy, you're toast.
First mortgage, 12.5%, 1988. Yeah, that was me. So rule of thumb, rough rule of thumb here is that for every 1% that mortgage rates go up, the equivalent monthly mortgage payment that you can afford makes the value of the house go down by 10%, right? So if we had a $500,000 house at 5% mortgage rate, if that goes up to 6%, that is now worth 10% less. So $450,000 would be the equivalent, rough rule of thumb, that somebody could afford, where the monthly mortgage payment's about the same. So somebody who was investing, Paul, when mortgage rates were reliably ticking down, means that the house they bought was reliably ticking up.
Yes.
In price or value, right?
Yes.
Well, this is just the opposite of that now.
That is the opposite of that. And they were fortunate enough, because I remember my uncle had a rule of thumb in the 1990s. If you can buy a property and the equivalent market rent will pay for that property in 6 to 7 years, always buy it. Mm-hmm. So interest rates being high, not as many investors were there. Coming down, it started becoming more affordable. People were having good experiences in their homes. They start buying multiple rental properties that were fortunate enough to be able to think about it from that standpoint. It's a completely different environment.
6 to 7 years. So you're saying, I'm just going to make numbers up so I can understand this. If I could get $10,000 of income off a property, I better be buying it for 60 or 70,000.
That was the rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And you could actually buy properties like that easily in the 1990s.
Well, this is the actual rule of real estate investing, which I think some people may have forgotten, but Robert Kiyosaki drilled it into me. I learned from some other people, is that a house is not an asset.
Yes, your primary residence.
That's a liability.
Yes.
So when you get over into a house being an asset, assets are, here's his definition of an asset. I love this. An asset puts cash in your pocket.
Yes.
A liability takes cash out of your pocket.
Yes.
So the only value that a rental property you own actually has is its ability to generate cash in your pocket. That's called free cash flow.
Yes.
It's got to have positive free cash flow. That's it. But a lot of people got caught up with, like, well, the value of my property is that, plus it's going to go up in price, which is that 40-year trend line we're looking at there. And now we're just here saying, well, what if that 40-year trend line is broke and it's over, and we're in the opposite of that, which is 30 years of rising interest rates, or whatever the equivalent would be? Totally different.
Completely different environment.
Your investment properties have to generate free cash flow.
They do. And
you have to be ready for the idea that if you're doing it on a typical, say, a commercial deal where you have a 5-year and then it adjusts, you better be thinking about, does it still cash flow when it adjusts to twice the interest payment?
Yes.
You just have to factor in that, like, actually, let me be softer. There's a number at which this thing no longer cash flows.
That's right.
That'll be an interest rate you can calculate, and you should say, oh, how likely do I think that number is?
Yes.
Yeah.
And wherever that is, if the bank will give you the opportunity, pay the intangible tax and lock it in for 20 years instead of doing 5, right? So especially now, because the risk is that interest rates go up dramatically. Yeah. And I'd rather lock in for 20 years, and that risk is on the bank. And if rates go low, great, I'll refinance lower. Than to have a 1-year arm or a 3-year arm adjustable rate mortgage is what the acronym for ARM is.
Yeah.
Or a 5-year, and then you wake up and you're renewing at 15, 16, 17%.
Yep. All right. So I think, again, we've been hammering on this for a while in a few episodes, but I think it's really important to just mentally think through, what if this is a break in that 40-year trend?
Yeah.
And it could be for reasons we're going to get into in just a second. This is actually a pretty big deal. The poison Easter egg that Janet Yellen left in Trump's lap starting today, the 21st, we'll get to that in just a second. This was one that surprised me because this was under that same thread by Bravos Research. I didn't know this, and Paul, I am an astute gold investor.
I tracked the gold market as well like crazy, and I had no clue when this came out.
So get this. He writes here, since March of 2020, gold has outperformed bonds by 100% amidst surging government spending. So there's two things on this chart. One is just government spending, black line. The red line, the red line is gold divided by TLT, which is the 20-year Treasury thing. So it's just showing if the red line is going up, that means the gold is performing better,
Yes.
than TLT.
Yes.
Okay. But look, what caught me was the correlation. I hadn't run this one before. Gold divided by interest, or the cost of those bonds compared to government spending. That's a pretty tight. It says that the more government spending you get, the more gold's going to go up in price relative to bonds.
Well, in seeing this, that's a correlation I'm going to start tracking, actually.
Yeah.
Because what have we talked about? Gold's breaking out for the past several years. You hear news of, and China apparently bought a lot more here recently. It's foreign central banks, China, Russia, the BRICS are buying. Interest rates are going up. Gold prices are going up. Dollars going up. Gold prices are going up.
Yeah.
We've all debated how in the world that could happen because that's something that's not happened in the past. And this is a correlation I want to pay attention to because it's tracking it really, really closely, close enough to where there is enough to pay attention to there if government spending is to reverse dramatically.
Yeah. I'd like to see it updated because just by eye, it kind of looks like it ends in 23 or maybe late 22. And by the way, I know it's outdated because it says government spending has risen from 3.4 to almost 4. It's now 7. It's almost 7. So
Just in a year and a half, if that ends in mid-23.
yeah, I want to see that updated, see if that still holds. But point I would take from this is that I know government spending is now really locked in. There's very little. I know Doge and all of that, but you and I went through that flow chart of government expenditures, and you're kind of like, well, no, we can't do anything about the interest payments. I can't really do anything about Social Security. Like once you start crossing through what they can do, there's like this little tiny thing they're going to have to just like monkey hammer.
Well, what about the areas where there's built-in fraud? Maybe some of these areas that or not necessarily fraud per se but lining their own pockets. I mean,
Yeah.
I have clients from consistently, because I work with so many retirees that'll have events or knee surgeries, and they're just talking about all of the excess expenses that's in the medical process.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's enough to dramatically reverse that chart.
No, I'm sure there's efficiencies that can be gained, and I'm all for them. As a taxpayer, I just hate inefficient stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that would be fine. Now, in that same series from that tweet thread or X thread, whatever we call them these days, Bravos was pointing out too that Treasury bond issues, right? They're going to have to, they're called private Treasury. They have two parts. They have a public and a private component, right? So anyway, just massive, huge amounts of bond issuance. We know that's coming out the door. And the reason that's so important is, we have this kabuki theater every year where they raise the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's it. That's the ceiling. And to me, ceiling is something tangible and firm.
Yes.
Something that never has a ceiling because you always raise it is not a ceiling.
Well, most Americans experience a ceiling on their credit card debt when they start spending too much money. There's a cap. It's a ceiling. Go above that.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, we have a debt ceiling, and it turns out that Janet Yellen, how do you say it in the South? Bless her heart.
Bless her heart. She's as dumb as a box of rocks is what we would say here in the South.
I know she's got that little grandmotherly act. Don't fall for it.
Oh, no.
Steve Bannon writing, you can't make this up. Yellen tells Trump we hit the debt ceiling on the 21st day of the second term. That's today.
Yeah, so we had talked about it back in the summer. They're going to run this economy hot
Yeah.
as much as they can, and they're going to try to hand him all kinds of trouble.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that she didn't know that this was coming. You can't tell me that she didn't prep for this, because, you know, some of the reports that are out there claim that her issuance and spending money like she has in the Treasury is even more impactful to the markets than what QE were. Mm-hmm. And now she's run it hot, run it empty. Here you go.
Huge amounts. Wait a minute. I think you had a chart in here. I'm going to find it because that just,
Yes,
it was this one, right?
it's that one right there.
Yeah.
15 trillion. The only U.S.
So that's Janet Yellen. She's the Fed vice chair during that first big box, right?
Yes.
$0.8 trillion debt increase. That is monotonically stair steps up. But then look at her as Treasury Secretary.
8.4 trillion. So the statistics are, and I don't have my paper here somewhere, but somewhere in the neighborhood of, so she is the only government official who has presided over an expansion of our federal debt by 15 trillion between her time as Fed vice chair and chair and Treasury Secretary.
Wow. Unbelievable.
And I really never liked the idea of somebody leaving the Fed and then going to the Treasury Secretary, because what that allows the Treasury Secretary to do is run whatever games with the Fed that they wanted to run behind the scenes before, and it gives cohesion between the two. I would rather have somebody that's not come out of the Fed into the Treasury.
All right. Well, we should take some of that nice Georgia marble, etch this into it, and in 800 years, this will be in the British Museum with a placard under it that says fiscal vandalism.
Yes, that is.
This is vandalism.
It's vandalism at the expense of the American people, at the expense of
Critical.
at the expense of the least fortunate of the American people.
Yep. I agree. So, okay. So first up, though, this doesn't mean we run out of money today, later this afternoon. The Treasury has a cash balance right now. I went to the daily Treasury statement, the DTS, pull it down, next chart. Look, we have $650 billion in cash in the kitty right this moment. But when you hit the debt ceiling, you can't issue more debt. So how long is $650 billion going to last? Sounds like a big number. Well, that used to be 2 years of deficit.
No longer than a week ago, it was 680.
Right.
Yeah.
680. So I pulled this other thing, the deficit tracker, Paul, through 2025. So the fiscal year starts October 1st, as it runs October through September 30th. So those first 3 months, which would be October, November, December through December, that was $710 billion of deficit spending so far. So how long would 650 last? Now, April's coming, but that's not for 4 months from now. So it'll probably last a couple, 3 months. Mm-hmm. And then we're out. Out of cash.
Then we have a massive crisis around June.
You can't even let that get to zero, though. You can't spend that to zero because they have to. So here's what would happen if the Treasury runs out. Let's say they say, oh, we'll keep $150 billion in buffer in, but they don't actually know what their expenses are going to be and what bills come due. They don't really actually know. Auditing, their accounting standards are terrible. So they know that you can't renege on the interest payment. So when an auction comes due, let's say a whole blob of 28-day bills come due, the government has to give that money back on that auction day with interest, right? So that's just cash out the door. And if they can't roll them and increase them like they need to, this money runs down quick. The last thing they can afford to do is allow the Treasury auction to fail or to not make an interest payment. And by fail, I mean they have to roll these things over. Mm-hmm. And if people start to think that they're not going to get paid, Treasury auctions begin to fail.
They begin to fail, which means rates go up to the point that people are comfortable carrying the risk associated with it, and then that throws a massive wrench in the rest of the economy.
Well, I use Treasury Direct, which is a direct program where you can have money come out of your bank account or a brokerage account, go into the Treasury, and come back again on a routine basis. It's got good interest, way better than what my bank can offer. So I use it. But Paul, as soon as I suspect that there's some brewing problem, I'm backing out of that program.
Yes. Yeah, because you're not going to be bidding on that price. They're going to fill your order first, and then somebody else is going to get a higher price, right?
If enough people back away, they have to they have to go to the next
level.
So the interest rates go up, and then it begins to spiral. Okay. But most people don't know this. So, and that's an intentional spelling error, everybody who's reading this.
I like that. Treasuries.
Yes, U.S. Treasuries.
That may be something that sticks for some time, Chris, by the time this is over, is treasuries.
Well, back in the day, they used to call U.S. government bonds certificates of confiscation.
That's right. They did, didn't they?
And that was because you were getting paid 6%, but inflation was 9%. So that money was just getting confiscated through the process of inflation and hidden tax. All right. So what the Fed did here is they said, oh, we printed all this money, but now we're going to go into quantitative tightening, QT. They've been winding down their balance sheet. They look like good boys and girls. And that's the story they've been telling. But the truth is, during COVID, they shoved so much money into the banking system that there was $2.25 trillion of excess reserves just cranking around out there. And so that's the Fed's overnight reverse repo program balance, blah, 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 big mouthful. But the point is that that's been getting worked off and walked down. That's the pool that they've been using to operate like quantitative easing. Paul, that's what they've been buying the treasuries with. Well, that's almost gone too. So Yellen knows this. She was involved in these programs infinitely.
Absolutely.
So she's watching this run down, doesn't do anything, engineers it so that there's going to be a debt crisis in the first minutes of the Trump presidency.
Yes.
And she did it on purpose. But this people need to know about.
Yes. Well, and just because she looks like she's dumb as a box of rocks, again, to reiterate, she knew exactly what she was doing. And she knows the impact on the economy because of her time as vice chair and chair at the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
And moving over to the Treasury. So this is just another area where they've handed him a ticking time bomb. And what makes me so angry about it is they don't care about the American people. They care about their own pride. They care about protecting their secrets that are back there. And let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and just say that it was like two parents that are warring, right? And the kids are just get caught up in the crossfire, and the parents don't realize until a decade later how much damage was done. But even at the inauguration, we were sitting here pointing out, Trump had something to say, and talking about Martin Luther King, they couldn't even stand up for that. They couldn't stand up and clap for anything that he had to do for the American people. Some things I understand because he pretty much slapped them in the face. But where's their dividing line? Do they hate him so much that they can't even stand up to celebrate what he had good to say about Martin Luther King Day?
Well, it's kind of like, I presented this during a Signal Hour yesterday about Mark Milley, the general chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? His position was Trump was such a bad thing that he had to do everything he could to help save our democracy. And I think they had that same point of view. And Yellen probably thinks, well, this is just me making sure that Trump is tangled up because he's bad for our democracy. Okay, can we just back up? Democracy means the will of the people.
Yes.
The will of the people was very clear in this last election, and this is her operating as if that's irrelevant. She knows better. She knows what the true democracy really means, and it's something that benefits her and her friends. And that's how I read this. That's why I get a little cranky about it, because it has nothing to do with what's right for the country or its people. And this is my way of saying I'm expecting much higher interest rates because this could get chaotic.
It could get chaotic in a hurry. So, and the worst part is she's doing the damage to the people that she has no clue what it's like to live their lives. She has no clue what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, to worry about where food's going to come as a single mother for her kids, or a father that's had his wife pass away that's having to raise their kids. I mean, she's so disconnected from reality, and that's a problem with a lot of the elitists. I think the only thing that keeps Trump from being so disconnected is when you're in construction, you're working with people who are the salt of the earth, and they're working hard, and they don't mind getting right in your face and hollering. So maybe he has a little bit more connection to the average person than anybody else in the halls of power.
Well, it's an interesting thing watching, who shows up at the rallies and all this and that. And I saw a lot of Trump rallies, and I scanned the crowds carefully, and they're just good heart, look like regular, ordinary, hardworking people. That's what it looked like. I didn't see too many deplorables. I didn't know what else. I noticed that. Hey, remember last time, switching gears here, we talked about inflation. Remember inflation came in one tick better than expected, and we saw 2% explosion in the markets have been going up ever since. I don't know if you saw this. I'm going to surprise you with this one because I love this one. So Jim Bianco, Wasteland Capital said, hey, the dude at the Bureau of Labor Statistics who late last night rounded down from core CPI to 3.2 instead of up to 3.3 is the hero the market needed. And Jim said, well, core CPI was 3.248, which they rounded to 3.2.
They rounded 3.248 to 3.2.
Because if core TPI was 0.002 higher, it would have been 3.25, which goes to 3.3. So get that 0.002% was all the difference that they needed to just explode the markets higher and go crazy.
Golly. And we all know that that's still a twisted number.
It's still just, yeah, it's not correct.
And the market's just like, woo.
Yeah. Now, what was interesting, so we were on our fishing trip, I was talking with Joel and his dad, they got cattle, and he said something that shocked me. So I've participated in a few, but I have old reference numbers in my head. He said live weight for a cow. Mm-hmm. I have numbers in my head. I used to buy them at around $1. Mm-hmm. $6 a pound.
$6
A live weight.
Wow.
Like you can't even grind it up without selling that cow for 12. I mean, but for a hamburger, but that, you know, those were ones that are meant to grow. $6.
$6. That's incredible.
All right. Well, anyway, here's live cattle price on futures. They're just screaming higher. A lot of reasons. The herd is at the lowest it's been.
Yes.
Since the 60s, and obviously population's doubled since then. So twice as many people, half as many cows compared to then. And then first time I've run into this, we went to 2 local stores and there's no eggs here. And I've heard there's no eggs up in New Hampshire either.
Yes. Oh, you heard in New Hampshire. Yeah, locally here.
Yeah.
Apparently south of here, there's no eggs too. One of my staff just told me a minute ago.
How are there no eggs?
I don't understand that. I don't ever remember ever have it. Now, there's been issues with snowstorm comes in and those shelves are cleared out in one day.
A bread alert to bread alert.
Bread alert's bread alert. 2-3 days later, the shelves are full because people buy. They're not gonna just consume it all in a day or two. But I don't understand how we've got egg shortages right now.
Well, beef is going to be expensive going forward based on this. A lot more expensive.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that's interesting. So some of the farmers I've talked to around here, you've had a lot of individuals move in from areas that were a lot more expensive. So they're coming in and buying some of these farms, buying out some of these older farmers that were done and want to be finished. And they're breaking all the leases for hay harvesting. So hay prices have been pretty expensive around here, still continuing to go up. So all of the input costs are going up for everything from livestock raising as well, live cattle.
Yeah.
Processing costs.
Yeah. Yeah, we just had a comment at Peak Prosperity on the site where somebody mentioned that they got and they printed the whole letter that they got from they buy lamb. And the people who are processing the lambs, well, they raised them, but they bring them to a slaughterhouse. And they said the slaughterhouse jacked their prices in 2 ways. One, the slaughter cost alone went from $125 to $175 per animal, which when you're a small producer, that $50, you either pass that on or you eat it. They don't have that much, they can't eat that, so they had to pass that on. And the second thing was that now they won't pick up the offal, the innards for sheep, and you have to pay to haul it away. It used to be they would take it and, I don't know, make it
Some new regulations
or something. And the regulations also said the farmer couldn't just pick it up themselves, so they have to pay a $30 disposal fee per animal. And so they were just like, we don't know how much longer we can continue doing this, but you're going to hear that story over and over again. And then you think back, Paul, to how the Dutch are crushing on their farmers, and the UK decided to make farmers responsible for some special inheritance tax, and farmers in the US for some reason can't produce eggs or meat anymore, and the small people. So I feel like this is intentional. It feels once is an accident, twice is coincidence, but if 3 times is enemy action, every time I turn around, and as you and I have talked, Evie and I got no eggs for 3.5 months out of our chickens till we switched the feed.
Yes.
I think they put something in the feed or forgot to put something in the feed. Something about that feed stopped a small producer from producing their own eggs.
Yes.
Was that intentional? Look, we've known how to put the right stuff in feed for hundreds of years. Did we just lose that ability all of a sudden?
I don't know. I was so concerned about it because I've been growing chickens in the backyard since 2014. I've never experienced anything like that. I remember telling you I was building a list to make my own chicken feed. You can do that. I know there's some people out there that are doing it. And I changed my feed to Tucker Mill out of Alabama, and my production came back just like that. Except for last night when we had 8 eggs. It may be the cold weather though, because we had
it's a
big cold snap.
pretty big cold snap. That can slow them up a bit if it's a big change. So I do feel like, yeah, food's going to get more expensive anyway. But there's a general theme here, Paul, that I'm starting to get going. You know me. I think commodities are going to come back in here, and you were just saying some of your tools are starting
Yes.
to indicate they're getting excited.
Yes, and I'm cautiously hopeful and excited. We've seen commodities raise their head quickly in the past, and it fades out real fast. So it's kind of like, infatuation that goes away, never turns into love. But this has been different than what we've seen since really 2013, 14, when the U.S. markets became the only place to be. This has been a slow, gradual, and something that actually surprised me. So I look at my tools, and this main tool we look at weekly. Okay, so weekly is our signal on this because it's a long-term big picture. And when it crossed over, I was actually quite surprised, even though I've been watching it because it's been so gradual. So this gives us the opportunity to start looking for and building entries into commodities. And I mean, we've had exposure to gold and somewhat silver. Silver's been kind of not added to new portfolios for a while because it's just been sideways since the big move. So legacy portfolios have it. Gold has been continuing and a slow breakout again. I really like what I'm seeing in gold right now.
As we
cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
And if but we're looking for entries into commodities cautiously. And if this is similar to the shift that occurred after the 1990s, commodities were dead in the 1990s. U.S. equities were only thing, the technology bubble.
Yeah.
Which is where we are again, is technology bubble. And for those of you out there that were shocked by I'm not just talking about me, just talking about across the industry, I've heard from other people shocked at how the portfolios pulled back in December. Now, we had an overall market pullback, but what's interesting is coming into December, you had the Russell 2000 that was pretty strong. It was starting to break out again and take off. And then all of a sudden, the Russell 2000 puked in December. So we're back to that Magnificent Seven-led rally. And I think all it's going to take is for the technology bubble to burst. And it will at some point. Just don't know when. Momentum's a hard thing to I wish we could apply calculus to the momentum, but the human brain doesn't work. And math doesn't work that easy. But I believe there's going to be a flood of money come back into value and commodities. And I think we're on the verge of a generational commodity bull market.
All right. Well, speaking of commodities, can I talk about my favorite thing, energy, for a second?
Yes.
So I don't know what this means yet. I mentioned earlier that, the executive order came out on January 20th, so Trump is ready. We know he's got the drill, baby, drill thing going, but the point is that you can say drill, baby, drill all you want, but that doesn't make anybody drill.
No.
The oil business really, you understand.
Why would you carry the risk right now with the prices where they are?
Exactly. And the prices just keep getting monkey hammered every so often, like they just did last night again. So the reason, so I'm an oil and gas investor at the well level, and so I understand this business reasonably well. It's money. That's it. Like if the price of oil went up, you'd find more people out there taking some of their marginal prospects, right? So like in a shale space, hundreds of thousands of acres, they know where the core tier 1 acreage is. And then they know it gets a little less they've been drilling in a straight line, and it's been good, slightly less, and then it's sort of marginal. Well, that marginal territory is fine if the oil's 100 barrels.
High enough, it's worth the risk.
It's not. It's almost a matter of plumbing in some of these. They know what the pressure gradients are. They know how much they're going to get on a well.
So how's he going to, that's great, drill, baby, drill, but how's it going to happen unless prices go higher?
I don't see how it does. So now we've got to come up with a program. Well, here's how we could make more come out of the ground. Starts refilling the SPR.
Well, he did say he's going to fill it to the rim.
You fill the SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve, back up, and that actually causes more demand, makes the price go up, and then you get more. It's kind of, anyway. But oil's really simple to understand. It's price dependent, full stop. It's a very risky business. Dry holes happen. It's one of the deadliest businesses you can be in. From a worker standpoint, if you haven't watched Landman, take a peek.
Landman's great movie.
What a great series that is on Paramount, I think it is.
Yes,
it's great, and it's very capital intensive. It just takes tens of millions to operate a single well over its lifetime usually. So, but look at this. He said, "quote: the policies of the previous administration have driven our nation into a national emergency," which I tracked this closely. I wasn't aware we were in an emergency. personally.
Well, that's okay. On the verge of, though, they drew our strategic petroleum reserves, SPR, down to zero. So
That's true.
That's like
That's precarious.
that's like us having no savings with all the concerns we see in the economy. So that's one area that I could.
And but he gets to, yes, and he gets to this one spot that I agree with. He said we're a precariously inadequate and intermittent energy supply. So he's just dunking on wind and solar gas, and an increasingly unreliable grid requires swift and decisive action. So this unreliable grid. Okay, yes, I mean we just haven't invested in our grid in a long time. It's shabby.
Yes.
It really is. But more importantly, I think that's a wink to the fact that we're slamming in AI data centers. And I mean, these things are beasts, Paul. 1, 2, 3. You saw Sam Altman come out and say, we need 5 gigawatt centers. So to put that in perspective, a city of 1 million people needs about a 3 gigawatt power plant. So he's saying we need to build 6 new American cities of about, I don't know, 1.5, 1.6 million people each.
Wow.
Just to run data centers.
That puts it into understandable terms.
Yeah.
That's just for the data center.
Just for the data center.
That's not counting the transformers, the lines, the metal, the construction. That's just for the data center.
Yep. 5 gigawatts, right? So anyway, so we know we're slamming them in. We do not have the grid there. We don't have the power generation. So I've been talking about nuclear for a while. I think that's pretty cool. But he says this situation will dramatically deteriorate in the near future due to a high demand for energy and natural resources to power the next generation technology. So this is where I get my little resource thing kicking around. So natural resources, code speak for commodities, right?
Yes.
They classify, say this, when they say energy, they're talking coal, oil, natural gas, nuclear, When natural resources are all the things you need to get those things
Yes.
in the first places, right? So that's interesting. That's a very big shift. This almost sounds to me, Paul, like the beginning of an actual energy strategy where somebody says, wow, energy is important. We know what we got. We know where we're going. We know what we need. We better find a way to get there.
Yes. Yes.
I think that has huge implications for resources. I really do.
It really does. And I would say if you're going to bring honesty back, you're not going to have market manipulators within the government. They're going to be shorting certain commodities just to keep them down for the inflationary benefits. Yes. And let's deal with it. Let's deal with reality. Let's get it there. Let's get the new technology. Something will come along if we face the truth.
Reality, I'm such a realist. I can't wait for reality to come back and have a seat at the table. It's going to be amazing.
Well, hey, he did say there's only 2 genders now, so reality is coming back a little, men and women.
As a biologist, by training, I'm not at all unhappy with that. But look at this. He also, he's not afraid to poke fingers. Quote, these numerous problems are most pronounced at our nation's northeast and west coast, where dangerous state and local policies jeopardize our nation's core national defense and security needs, so he's elevating it to a national defense frame, and devastate the prosperity of not only local residents, but the entire United States population. 100%, absolutely true. In light of these findings, I hereby declare a national emergency. End quote. So let me tell you, so
I actually missed that.
yeah.
I didn't realize he declared a national emergency.
Yeah.
Good.
Is invoked an emergency. Okay. Now, I live in Massachusetts, and one of my state senators has Indian heritage. Pocahontas.
Oh, that's right. I was thinking that.
Elizabeth Warren. But in the interest of saving the climate,
Sorry,
right?
she's yours.
I'm so sorry too. In the interest of saving the climate, you know what's happened is they won't allow any gas pipelines into the state. And I happen to live only one other state border away from if the Marcellus Shale was a country, it's the 3rd most powerful natural gas producer in the world. I mean, it is a prime field. It can give decades of really cheap, abundant, affordable, prosperity-inducing energy. And because we want to save the environment, we haven't, like, no pipelines, right? You wouldn't believe, like, our state's like, absolutely no. But we still use natural gas. You know what they have to do? They ship it down to Freeport. It gets converted into LNG to evade something called the Jones Act. It then is shipped to Barbados. The ship is either reflagged, I don't know what the mechanism is, and then they sail it up to Boston, and then they offload it. And so our natural gas prices are the same as Europe's. we have shot ourselves in both our feet saying, no, we don't want any of that cheap gas. We don't want any of that Russian pipeline gas from Tennessee. We don't want any of that crap, you know?
It's shipped to Barbados before it comes back home. Mm-hmm. How much energy is wasted doing that?
About 8 to 12% to turn it into a liquid into a first place.
Okay.
And then you lose about 1, maybe 2% in transit because they have to boil it off to keep it cool. But it's still it's
So 15% is just light a match to it.
that's gone. Just gone. Yeah, we didn't do anything with that 15%. We didn't plow a field, warm a house. We did nothing. We just used it to make it. But that's how stupid it is. So I think that's what he's talking about here is particularly in the Northeast and the West, which is California, right? We have these stupid rules that are just brain dead.
Yeah,
And they harm the people who live there.
Mm-hmm. That raises your cost of living.
Because our gas and pipeline would probably be about $3,
Mm-hmm.
and right now it's 14 because of that shipping rigmarole.
And all of the pockets that are being lined in that process back.
Well, somebody has to pay for that liquefaction plant. If you've seen them, Paul, these are multi-billion-dollar, and these are expensive,
Ridiculously complicated.
ridiculously expensive pieces of equipment. So that's capitalized. That's part of the cost of LNG is that huge thing, right? Anyway, that's what he's talking about here. So,
Or you could put it in safely, have some revenue to the people that it goes across their property, or pay them for coming in, bless the people, cover it up, keep it protected, monitor it, and cut the cost to the average American.
gas pipelines run everywhere. They're not magic.
Yeah.
We had that dialed in a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yes, it's pretty standard. If somebody said we're putting a gas pipeline through your property, I'd be like, okay,
Yeah. Bring it through.
just give me a little taste.
Yeah, I was going to say, can I have a free tap?
I just want to tap. I just need a 1/4-inch line.
I would negotiate.
You'll never even notice it.
I don't want royalties. I don't want free. Just let me have a tap.
I would take that deal. So, but I think this is going to have huge impacts on the markets. I'm not expecting this to result in a bonanza of oil because I just don't see it working that way. Oil's going to have to go up in price. But this could have really big impacts on how this stuff is distributed and used around. So this means pipeline companies, transit companies, But this will probably result in, I'm a little concerned that we haven't quite thought through, even at this level yet, how much natural gas we have coming out of the ground versus how much we need versus how much we're exporting. So that's a whole other story, and I'll get into that in more detail later on at some point. But at least now we have, I haven't read anything like this in 10 years.
No.
Where somebody said, wow, energy is important. We better get this right.
Yes. Yes. And accepting reality is part of making the turn and making the difference, turning from our ways. And hopefully that's the direction we're headed in, is we're turning from our ways.
Yeah.
And it's going to be good for the average American. Here's a question I'll ask you about the drill, baby, drill. So is it possible in this case, he's clearing the way, getting rid of the regulations. This is what we want to do, mentally prep the drillers to drill, make it easier for them to start tapping. All the red paper's gone, follow your environmental rules, basic cover, and then start refilling the SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and know you're going to drive that price up a little bit, but because you've taken the shackles off of the industry, you're going to have a little bit of a cap in that supply demand. Do you think that's a part of his strategy potentially?
It could be. I mean, if he's really thinking long term, so the shale basins themselves are pretty well drilled up. There's more acreage to go, but we kind of know what's there, right? There's not a lot of surprises left. What we'll call the contiguous 48. Most people don't know this, Paul, but at last count, and this was years ago, so we probably have to add a whole number to this, there were 5 million holes had been punched in the surface of our soil.
Wow.
So it's sort of the find it by Braille method. So people are like, oh, there could be more. I'm like, please point to this map where there are no holes already.
Yeah.
Right? Unless we just missed a pocket or it's deeper. But, the 3D mapping on this now is extraordinary.
I was going to say that they do it from satellites now, right? And they do it on the...
Yeah, and on the ground too. But there's a lot of things they can do. So one of the coolest maps I ever saw, so I'm at this geology oil thing. And this guy said, oh, let me show you, because I showed some interest. He said, let me show you this map my dad made. And it's from 1948. He unrolls a map the size of this table here. It's a big table.
It is a big table.
Okay, whole thing. And there's all these little numbers, and it's just 2 counties in Texas. And you know what those numbers were? In the 40s, they had this really sensitive gravitometer that they would tow around behind a pickup truck, stop, wait for everything to stop settling, shaking, tune it carefully, take a gravity reading, move 100 yards, take another gravity reading. So they had this map of gravity readings because the salt domes, which would often catch oil, were less density than the surrounding rock. And if you mapped it right, he said, you see that? We found this light gravity reading here. We started putting wells in. This is how my family got wealthy.
That's amazing.
Yeah. They made gravity maps in the 40s
That is incredible.
to help find oil because it's less dense than the rock if it's really filled it up volumetrically. So they do all that kind of stuff, but the 3D mapping now, they know this stuff cold.
Okay.
So Biden, in one of his last petulant acts, he said 650 million coastal acres are now off limits. Due to the Coastal Act, he invoked Rule 12B to take it off the table, and now they're going to have to catfight to see if they can undo that. I think if Trump's thinking long term, he's on a mission, he's here to make America great again, you open that up. But let's imagine tonight, they start out there with their seismic ships, mapping. They'll find stuff, guaranteed. How much? But even if they found some tonight, it's going to be 5 years before any starts flowing out of the ground because first is you find it, then you got to get this big exploratory drill rig. You punch some 2-inch holes just to see what's down there. You go, ooh, cool. You map it as best you can. Then you bring out your main drilling platform to make your production holes. And then you got to either figure out how you're going to tie a pipeline all the way back or an offshore loading terminal to ship it in. There's all this infrastructure. It just takes time, and it's the ocean, and it's trying to kill you and sink your stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's a business.
Yes.
Risky business.
Salt water eats that steel like crazy, too.
Sure does. It's brilliant what they do. Problem. You could do this anytime. Not a recommendation for or against, but if you pull up Transocean, which goes by RIG, is a ticker symbol, destroyed as a company. So we have almost no offshore capability left in the world. It's been skinny. It's just been hollowed the heck out.
Because of all the policies that have happened in the past between the Obama administration, even prior to that, right?
That I'm convinced if we could peel the covers back, we would find out. We know overtly that the Biden administration day traded the price of oil by dumping this strategic petroleum reserve in. They drove price down on purpose. They told us they were going to do it, and it happened, so maybe it went that way. I think that there's strong evidence that there have been some other forces driving the paper price of oil down, so they wanted to keep it down politically. Whether that's true or not, the price of oil has been way below the level that would incentivize offshore. That needs, in today's environment, Paul, 100, 110 to even begin to justify going out there after it.
Okay.
Right? There's only been 2 that I know about. There's one off of Guyana, really rich field, not that deep, not that technical. You can get to it. That one, but honestly, the world should have been drilling like crazy. I think there's a lot off the East Coast. I'm less convinced about the West Coast, but it'll be years before we get that.
Yeah.
Years. So I don't know what he can do about drill, baby, drill. If he wants more oil out of the ground, make it 110. More's coming out of the ground.
Okay. And they'll move quickly to get there for profits, and especially if you're not demonized for the profits that they're going to make.
Yep.
That makes a difference, too.
Yep. But that'll happen. It's coming. And then the other part of this is, for the life of me, Paul, can't figure out how you solve this without nuclear.
Well, and I don't understand why, based on the limited amount that I understand about nuclear. It's a lot safer than the days of 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. And then I remember reading that apparently China's created some type of technology that can shut down a meltdown. And they've tested it, correct?
Well, they have
familiar with that?
Well, they have what's called a thorium reactor.
Okay.
And that's a lifter, LFTR. It's a liquid fluoride thorium reactor. And it operates at 800 degrees Celsius as a liquid thermal molten salt.
Okay.
And if it does melt down, it melts through a little plug they have in the bottom, and it gets into a swimming pool-sized containment vessel, and it freezes, and the reaction stops.
So we have the technology to make it very safe.
If it melts down, it actually stops itself.
It stops itself.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe that's what I heard.
And they operate at 1 atmosphere pressure. The 3 Mile Island, it's a GE boiling water reactor.
Okay.
As a containment dome, it operates at many, many atmospheres of pressure, so that's something that's always looking to blow up anyway. And it's just highly complicated, very difficult to run.
Ancient technology.
Ancient. You know, do you ever see that there's a picture, the furthest one ever taken of Earth? It's not even a pixel, and it's from the Voyager.
Yeah.
That thing's a nuclear reactor. It's been operating since the 70s. You know, and it's the type of nuclear reactor that's not based on boiling water. It's a different process. So there are many other types out there. We're seeing how small modular nuclear reactors based on what are called the stage 4 designs that are coming out, right? Where you can build these things, pebble bed, but the thorium is the most exciting.
Okay.
Most exciting.
So we have the technology. All we have to do is embrace it and put it out there.
We don't have it. China has it.
China has it. Okay. China.
We don't have it.
I missed that. Well, you said China had it, but
We must be able to buy it from them, but no, if we started over, material scientists have to be born and bred, design specialists, nuclear, like it's a whole different thing. Like we don't just have people, you just, hey, MIT, you know, we need a production crew.
So we're paying the price for, what was it, 15 years ago, I think, China was, I can't remember the numbers, but this made me think of it, graduating 50,000 engineers out of the United States a year. And we were graduating, I don't know the number, I'm just going to pick, it was ridiculously low. I'm sure it's more than 5,000 engineers were graduating. I hope that's the case, but it was some ridiculous number. And, you know, we had all these political science majors that were equivalent to what their engineers were. And now they're reaping the benefits and we're not.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is an important thing. So I learned a couple things this past, I wanted to talk to you about this one. I was talking with a guy who shocked me because he said, so what we were talking about was this whole thing that's going on with China and the U.S. and how we're not really as dynamic as we used to be. And he said, did you know that China now has stronger intellectual property protections than the U.S. by far?
Really?
Mm-hmm. But
wait a minute, I thought they stole everything.
That for reasons, companies can choose where to file. More companies are choosing to file in China right now. They are the world's leading patent filers in the past few years because they actually have strong patent protections. He said, here's how it works. Ever since Citizens United, again, we shot ourselves in the foot, which is a Supreme Court decision that says the corporations can act as persons and they have rights and this and that. And so it turns out that because of that, if you're a small inventor and you file a patent, it's yours. Paul, you've just invented the ketchup flip bottle top and nobody else can use that. Heinz just goes, and they just start producing it, and then you have to sue them. And you sue them and you sue them and you sue them, but some bean counter at Heinz has said, it's going to cost us $500,000 a year to keep this guy tangled up, but we're going to be making millions. So it works out. Now in China, if you violate that, they will actually fine the living daylights out of that company or put the metaphorical bullet in the company and say, you no longer are a good corporate citizen, you're done.
So the corporation, I'm a person, you're treated like a person.
Yep. So you face real existential risk if you violate their intellectual property laws. Here it's some tangly thing and it's gourd systems and you know how it is. You get a bad judge and it doesn't matter anyway. So they have stronger protections. So now let's look at what's just happened. China has hypersonic weapons. We don't.
Yes.
They have an orbiting quantum satellite which has entangled photons and they're communicating with it 189 miles away, and we have nothing even remotely close to that. They have the world's fastest supercomputer by far. They're making huge advances in large language models, and I think they're going to beat us because they don't make their large language models say there's more than 2 genders. They let their large language models work with reality. Force ours.
Yeah.
To certain preconceived things, right? I mean, I'm sure you've seen the thing where people argue, would it be wrong, would it be worth having a nuclear bomb go off and kill 1 million people or misgender someone? And they'll argue that misgendering someone's a worse crime, right?
I know, that's great.
But they don't hamstring themselves with that nonsense. It's engineers, scientists.
Reality.
Honestly, they're dealing more with reality than we are these days.
That's amazing to me. Now, you mentioned about the patents getting sued. So my son submitted for a patent a year and a half ago. Great idea. Been sued 5 times.
What?
And he was the first to file for the patent. One of the persons that sued him tried to buy him, offered to buy him out of the patent to begin with. He's young and he's aggressive. He's like, no, I'm going forward. I want to try to make money on this. And it's just crushed his goal of trying to do it because he's young and doesn't have the capital to go fight all this. So I know a real world experience of that. And this isn't a technological advancement. This is just something that makes it a little easier for people to clean something. Brilliant idea that nobody's thought of before.
Well, guess what? He could go file in China, and he would
That's exactly what he needs to do.
And that's the dynamism that's been lost. And that's exactly what I think is wrong with the United States right now is this corporatism, whatever, right? So if they want to feed red dye number 3 to your kids and harm them, well, that makes them a few extra pennies. That's fine. That's what they do. Like, we've lost our way here. We have morality, integrity, right, wrong.
And what was it, Trump, if I remember correctly, he said something about the rule of law is going to apply to the average person just as much as the wealthy. And that's the problem with our country right now, is the powerful are able to tie you up in the courts, and the courts aren't just for the average person. They're not serving the average citizen. They're serving the interest or the corporate interests that are out there, the political interest.
Well, I actually think our sense of justice was hanging by a thread, and then Biden came along and pardoned his family.
Oh, my.
Fauci and Milley and the whole J6 committee who committed felonies ruining lives. There's certain things that are unpardonable in my world.
Oh, absolutely.
And a pardon, Paul, to me has to be predicated on you were charged, you were convicted, and you showed appropriate repentance.
Mm-hmm.
None of that happened.
So, no, I don't think one American out there, unless you were a Satanist, would be okay. Okay, let's say President Biden comes up and says, I want to pardon this individual that had ritualistic sacrifices for 150 babies. Okay, I'm not saying somebody did that. I'm just using an example because we don't know what they've done. Just an open-ended pardon. I think the large majority of this country would turn this country upside down if our president pardoned somebody for something like that. And you're having blanket pardons across the board for any action. Mm-hmm. And then Fauci comes out today and says, well, I did nothing wrong, you know. Well, why is he giving you a pardon if that's across the case? And look, Trump stood the test of the courts. He stood the political weaponization and came out the other side of this. If they didn't have anything to hide, they could have come out the other side of it themselves.
Well, there is an earlier Supreme Court decision from the 1900s which said that an admission of a pardon is an admission of guilt when you accept one.
Okay.
Right?
It's an admission of guilt.
Admission of guilt. It can stand in court as an admission of guilt. So I think that Fauci has now admitted guilt on some level.
Accepted it.
That's fine. He's free from federal laws. That's not free from state laws. So now I think Missouri's free to say, hey, you just admitted you're guilty. Mm-hmm. I hope.
I hope so, too.
Well, no, because the appearance, if not the actual reality of fairness under the law is really important, right? You have to have that. Because if you and I suddenly, and everybody in the community suddenly believes that laws no longer have any value and they don't matter and they don't apply, things get lawless quickly.
Well, Chris, I even now don't believe that if I got crossways between a billionaire, I don't believe that I would win fairly in a court because they're going to lawfare me to death and I don't have the funds. You know, I could spend everything that I had and it's a blip on a billionaire screen, much less a politician because they've got the courts and the connections and the funders that are there.
Yeah.
And I don't know many people out there that believe that they could stand up and get justice in that case.
Well, it kind of moved on from the public consciousness, maybe not everybody's, but that's the Luigi case, right? So here's this kid who feels like he has no other recourse. He feels he's been wronged heavily, and so he kills the CEO of United Health, right?
Oh,
Brian Thompson, right? So he's Luigi, whatever his name is, but anyway, everybody knows him by the first name. So as JFK said, those who would make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. So people are like, oh, he shouldn't have shot the CEO. And I'm like, listen, I agree, but tell me what his options were.
he had none.
What other options were there? Sue him in a court of law, which is rigged against him?
We would never see it. The media, do you think they're going to support that case? In no way whatsoever would the media go after it.
Yep.
They're going to try to cover it up because the advertising dollars they may lose.
Yeah. Well, now all this does tie back into portfolios and markets. You know how?
It does.
Because trust in the system is really important for it to keep operating. What we're describing, like that was one of the most singular damaging blows to the trust of the nation that what Biden just did, or it wasn't Biden, we all know he's demented. I mean, whoever his handlers were thinking, you know, it'd be a great thing, let's pardon all these miscreants for stuff they hadn't even admitted to, let alone been charged with. Going back to January 1st, 2014, kind of sus moment there.
And your entire family.
And your
except for your wife, I guess. She was the only one that wasn't put in there. Hey, I heard Janet Yellen was changing her name to Janet Biden. Sorry. I saw that on Twitter yesterday. I can't remember who to give it credit for, but I thought it was funny.
We're all Bidens.
Yeah, I was going to say, how can all you can do is laugh? I mean, no, it's bad. What's to keep? So now I find if the courts allow this to stand, if the American people allow this to stand, then if I'm a crime family, if you're a drug lord, you better head. I'm not saying that I want this to happen, but I'd go straight for the office of the presidency and then just pardon everybody you know, right? That's not. That's not what the spirit of the law and the opportunity for pardon is meant for.
No, it was a clear giant leap over, established everything. They're squinting at it like, it's almost like Nixon. You're like, no, it's totally not, right? But it's not. So that was a retrospective blanket pardon. We're hopping, skipping a jump now from a prospective blanket pardon. Paul, for the next 10 years, you're absolved. Like, be a good boy.
Whatever you want to do, but you're absolved. But just, golly.
No, it can't be allowed to stand. And
Let's have the courts deal with that. And how do you take it there?
Well, this is a constitutional thing because it's kind of written in I mean, you understand the spirit in the letter of the law. The spirit of the pardon was the president at their discretion can show mercy upon somebody who I think has gone through those. They assumed those prior steps. You've been convicted, showed repentance and all that, right? Okay, fine. Now it's been stretched and mangled in this particular instance pretty badly. But it clearly says the president, not the office of the president and whoever is around him when he's incapacitated. So remember this? I'm so old, I remember this. Last year, the Justice Department said, we were going to charge Biden, but he lacked mental capacity to be charged with a crime. Well, if you lack mental capacity to be charged with a crime, do you have mental capacity to absolve other people of crimes?
Well,
I would suggest no.
I don't understand the law, but that seems like a precedent has been set there that he's unable to make the correct decisions. Hey, and that does remind me, I've got to tell those listeners out there, one, it was a historic moment during the inauguration. Everybody's sitting in here, and we're getting to hear Chris. We're getting to hear Chris's live thoughts as the inauguration is going on. And then you did your signal hour yesterday. So
Right after.
The whole team sat up here. Evie was in here with us. The whole team sat up here and watched Chris, and we were just like, it was incredible just to see you pull that together with all those thoughts go straight in the signal hour. It was fun to watch. It really was.
Well, thanks for that. And thanks, everybody, for watching this. We went a little off the reservation at the end there, but these are historic, momentous times, and so
They are.
they really are. And we'll be back analyzing this and trying to make sense of it all. But let's keep our eyes there.
Two things I want to say before we go. One, Chris Martinson can cast a fly rod like a pro. I got a chance to see him cast, and I was very impressed. And you caught some pretty massive fish.
That was so special.
It was a good time. We were freezing. The sun came out, but I think when we left at the end of the day, it was 28 degrees, right? And we were standing on the river, and it was snowing. Thank the Lord that it didn't rain. But when we got in the river that morning, it was 40, 42, somewhere around there. So that big cold front was coming in.
Yeah.
And the second thing that I want to lay at the end of this is all of these issues, and this is something we can pick up next week, because what concerns me, especially watching the inauguration and just the level of disgust and refusal to come together as a country, what Janet Yellen has done, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve being drawn down, all of these potential grenades that they have laid in the lap of Trump coming in, from my perspective, means that more than ever, we need to be diligent about the risk of the great taking.
Absolutely.
And I know we don't need to jump into that now because but we can follow up with that next week. If there's any time that I am concerned about it more than any, and just to be diligent, right, is now. Because this is a period of time that I believe that the prior administration and those enemies of Trump and that refuse to accept the will of the American people would love to see it blow up on his watch.
And they would do that. They're petulant enough. If they're willing to run the Treasury down to zero and leave a giant mess, what are they unwilling to do? Nothing, as far as I'm concerned. So, well, thank you for listening, everybody. Great conversation, Paul. So if you want to talk with Paul and his team, possibly taken a call in this very room or visit them here, please come to peakfinancialinvesting.com, fill out a simple form. Somebody from Paul or his team will be back with you within 48 business hours and get the process started. So with that, Paul.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I've enjoyed the fellowship.
Me too. Bye, everyone.